The tires crunched over the narrow, leaf-strewn road as I crossed the faded wooden sign that read "Welcome to Black Hollow." The letters were chipped and flaking. The paint faded to the dull color of bone. October air hung heavy in the sky, cold enough to bite at my fingertips even through my gloves. The leaves here weren't the bright, fiery colors of a New England autumn postcard. They were muted, the reds too dark, bordering on brown, as if they had been stained by something thicker than rain. The trees leaned in toward the road, their bare branches knitting together overhead like skeletal fingers, letting in just enough light to see that the asphalt was patched with darker stains. I rolled the window down to take a picture, and the smell hit me. It was faint, at first metallic, like the tames of a penny pressed against your tongue. But as I drove deeper, the odor thickened, mingling with the damp musk of decaying leaves. It clung to the inside of my nose and throat, making me swallow hard to push it down. The first building I saw was a sagging farmhouse with its porch steps, half collapsed, and the paint peeling in long curls. A wind chime swayed in the breeze, each note dull and off-key, the kind of sound that would gnaw at you if you heard it long enough. I passed by shuttered storefronts, a gas station with a single rusted pump, and a church whose steeple leaned at a tired angle, the bell silent. No people, no cars, no movement except for a scrap of paper skittering along the sidewalk before vanishing into the gutter. Somewhere in the stillness, a low, hollow sound carried through the air. Impossible. Tita Diner was the only place in town with a light on. Its neon sign buzzing faintly above a door smeared with fingerprints that looked too dark to be grease. Inside, the air was warm but carried that same faint metallic tense, mixing with the smell of burnt coffee and fried food left too long on the grill. A man sat in the far booth, hunched over a chipped mug, steam curling up into the shadows under his cap. His coat was worn thin at the elbows, and his hands rested flat on the table, knuckles scabbed and raw, like he'd been dragging them over something rough. When I walked past, his head lifted just enough for me to catch the pale blue of his eyes. He studied me for a beat too long, his gaze sliding over the camera hanging from my neck. "You're not from here," he said, his voice low and rasping, each word deliberate. I told him I was here to write about the missing persons, to document the stories before they disappeared entirely. His eyes didn't leave mine, turned around and drive away. He said the words flat but weighted, like he'd said them before and no one listened. I tried to ask about the disappearances, but his gaze shifted toward the window, to the street outside where the fog had begun to gather in thin threads. "When the fog turns red," he murmured, "don't look back. Keep walking. No matter what you hear, don't answer when they call your name." His fingers tightened around the mug, and for a second I saw the faint tremor in his hands. The fog outside pressed closer to the glass, slow and curling, as if it were listening to him. Oh, place. But deep enough that I felt it in my ribs. The library stood at the far end of Main Street, its brick walls dark with age, the windows clouded over, as if they hadn't been washed in decades. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been, dry and still. carrying the musty weight of old paper and something sharper beneath it, that same metallic tang that seemed to cling to the entire town. Rows of tall shelves loomed like watchful sentinels, their spines cracked and titles faded. But it was the woman behind the desk who drew my attention. Mabel Crick looked impossibly fragile, her thin frame wrapped in a heavy cardigan several sizes too big, her white hair pinned back in a boom that had begun to unravel. Her eyes were pale, almost colorless, but sharp enough to cut. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask why I was there, just studied me with a strange recognition, as though she'd been expecting me. "You smell it, don't you?" she asked, her voice dry as parchment. I hesitated before answering, and she gave a faint nod, her hands resting on the desk. Her nails were cracked, the skin underneath stained dark, not with dirt, but something thicker, something that didn't wash away easily. She motioned for me to follow, leading me past the shelves to a narrow door at the back. It groaned open to reveal a steep set of stairs descending into shadow. The air grew colder as I followed her down, the smell of iron intensifying until it seemed to coat the inside of my mouth. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting an unsteady light over the basement walls. Symbols were scrawled across them in streaks of dried brown black, layered over each other until they formed a chaotic tapestry. In one corner hung strips of something leathery and thin. I stepped closer and realized the texture was wrong for leather. It was skin, mottled and curling at the edges. "They buried them alive," Mabel said, her voice almost reverent. "Not in dirt, in blood. Witches, thieves. Children didn't matter. They thought it was justice." She touched one of the symbols with the tip of her finger, leaving a fresh smear behind. But justice doesn't scream like that. Her eyes flicked toward me, unblinking, as though she was measuring whether I was ready to hear the rest. The trail into the forest began just beyond the last row of houses, marked by a gap between two leaning fence posts wrapped in rusted wire. The ground was damp and uneven, littered with leaves that clung together in thick, dark clusters, their edges hardened by something that had dried over them long ago. As I stepped forward, my boots made a faint, tacky sound, like peeling tape. From glass? The smell was heavier here, wet earth mixed with the sharp, undeniable scent of fresh blood. Half a mile in, the light thinned to a gray haze beneath the canopy. My breath came out in visible puffs, curling in the still air. That was when I saw the first shape leaning against a tree. At first I thought it was a scarecrow, the limbs too stiff, the head tilted at an unnatural angle. Then I saw the skin pale and shriveled lips stretched back to reveal teeth dark with dried blood. His eyes were gone, and in their place were two slow rivulets of red trailing down his cheeks. The tree behind him wept thick crimson streams from deep cuts in its bark, the liquid pooling around the roots and soaking into the soil like it was feeding. I lifted my camera, the flash breaking the dimness in a burst of white. In that instant, I saw faces pressed into the trees all around me, dozens of them, warped and sunken, mouths opening and closing without sound. The woods seemed to pulse under their skin, veins of red running deep into the grain. The fog was curling low along the ground now, carrying with it a faint pink hue. Something warm landed on my cheek. I wiped it away, and my hand came back wet and red. Another drop, hit my shoulder, then another, faster now, until the patter became steady. Blood dripped from above, seeping down from the branches in long, trembling strings. I could hear something moving between the trees, a slow, deliberate shifting, like roots being torn from the earth. Then, soft but distinct, came the sound I had been warned about my own name, spoken in a voice that was almost mine, but heavier, wetter, as if it had been dragged through something thick before reaching me. The glow of streetlights appeared through the thinning trees, and I stumbled toward them, my breath ragged, clothes clinging damp and heavy against my skin. The forest floor gave way to cracked pavement, but the sound of dripping didn't stop. It followed me, echoing faintly in the silence. The town stretched out ahead, but it was nothing like the place I'd driven into. Every building stood hollow, windows black and gaping, doors swinging loosely in the breeze. The diner's neon sign was dark now, the glass tubes fractured, and the smell of scorched grease had been replaced by the thick, unmistakable scent of fresh blood. Inside, the booths were overturned, tabletops streaked with long, dragging smears that glistened weightily in the dim light filtering through the broken windows. My boots stuck slightly to the tile floor with each step, a tacky sound that made my stomach turn. A trail of crimson led from the counter, across the floor, and out the side door toward the empty street. I followed it past the gas station with its shattered pump, past the church whose bell rope swung on its own, each sway releasing a faint metallic creak. The fog had returned, rolling down the street in low, heavy swells, and this time it wasn't pale. It was the deep, thick red of arterial blood, carrying the same metallic scent that had haunted every breath I'd taken since I arrived. It pooled at my feet, swirling around my ankles, leaving faint stains on the cracked asphalt. My camera dangled from my neck, its red recording light blinking steadily, capturing the way the fog twisted in strange, deliberate shapes. In the glass of a storefront window, my reflection stared back paler than I'd ever seen, eyes wide, lips parted, as a thin, steady stream of warmth spilled down my chin.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.